Hi, everyone. This is Tim Peck with my co founder, Sarah Blessing, here on Project Next, where we are trying to get away from the division and hate that the mainstream media is giving all Americans, especially us here at us Hoosiers, putting us in a place where we are fighting one another instead of taking the wider view and saying what's going on with the systems that we need to change. And so someone who has brought so many people together, works on both sides of the aisle, and really it's not about the aisle for her, if I could put some words in her mouth, it's really about the people she represents. Dr. Mayor Treva Hodges of Charlestown has joined us, and what we're talking about today is in Clark County, there's some problems with how the fire districts are currently laid out. And there's one part of Clark County that needs more fire help with its fire force, and that's Utica. It will affect, in a very big way, a lot of people in Clark County, well outside of Utica, the entirety of Clark County. And so it's really complicated. There's been lots of city hearings and people talking about it on social media. And so Mayor Hodges has been an expert on all of this. And so we invited her here to actually explain what's going on. We're going to talk about things like state taxes and how they work, local taxes and how they work, what a fire district is. It's going to be super confusing, but we are going to make it as clear as possible so people can be empowered with the information. Sarah.
Yes. So thank you, Treva. I just wanted to tell everybody how we first met because I don't think you realize what an impact it had on me. But we first met at the Harrison County Democrat Gala when I was newly running for county council and didn't know what I was doing. And I was pretty nervous about getting into the political world in Indiana. And you were our keynote speaker. And I didn't know you other than being told you were awesome. So I just was like, okay, she's awesome. So she comes, she delivers an amazing speech. She raises money for us. It was incredible. And then from ever since then, I'm like, oh, this is a mentor for me. I'm going to look at how she runs and does and speaks and does these things and helps people and leads and is a mayor of a town, and I'm going to model that myself. And so you have been a role model for me, and I would just like to say thank you. And I imagine I'm not the only woman out there looking at you and being thankful that you're leading in the way that you do. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sarah. You're making me blush.
It's all true. You're pretty amazing. Okay, so I do not understand a lot about fire districting, so I will stop if I get confused, and hopefully that will help if the viewer is also getting confused. So take it away, what's going on?
Okay, so currently in Clark County, the majority of the fire departments outside of the city of Jeffersonville, which is a city managed fire department, paid for out of their budget, their general fund for their community. The majority of us are divided up into, I think it's 5 fire districts. And a fire district is governed by a board of directors. And that board of directors is appointed by the county commissioners. So we elect county commissioners. We have 3 in Clark County. And those county commissioners appoint boards. It's a 3-person board to oversee these fire districts that are divided in different ways. So for instance, in Charlestown, the fire district comprises all of Charlestown Township, not just the city of Charlestown, but the whole township, as well as a small portion of Oregon Township. And that board contracts with a group to provide fire protection. So in Charlestown, it's the Charlestown Volunteer Fire Department. That is a standalone 501c3 organization. It is not affiliated with the city. It just happens to have the same name. So this is the model that currently is in Utica as well. The Utica Township as an entire township, except for the portion of Utica that is already annexed by Jeffersonville. Okay, so this is a critical point of what's happening here. A large portion of Utica Township is already annexed by the city of Jeffersonville. So it's City of Jeff, Township of Utica. I know it gets really muddy. But the Utica town itself, the small kind of central downtown area, and then a very small portion of the township comprised this district board. In the past, that district board contracted with New Chapel EMS, aka Jamey Noel, and I think there's a lot of people that understand the corruption that happened down here with Jamey Noel and misleading New Chapel. But the Utica Volunteer Fire Department was the standalone 501c3 organization that was providing the fire protection. Okay, so a couple different layers there. EMS, so the ambulance service is county-wide for whole Clark County, and that was provided in the past by New Chapel EMS. When New Chapel went out of the picture because of the scandal with Jamey Noel, the county commissioners contracted with another ambulance provider, Heartland, and they provide ambulance service for the whole of Clark County. But then these fire district boards have the responsibility of oversight of the fire protection. Okay. So back in May of last year, the city of Jeffersonville announced in the media that they were going to start a study for a fire territory. Now, there is one other fire territory that I know, or possibly two, but one for sure. So the town of Clarksville has a fire territory, and a fire territory operates differently than a fire district. A fire district with the board members is its own taxing entity. It functions from a tax perspective similar to a library or the schools or a city or a town, where each of us comprises a portion of the county property tax rate that people pay, and we get a portion of that revenue. We're subject to audits, state board of accounts, all that stuff equally. Okay. A fire territory is where two units, one has to be a city or a town, join together to combine their resources, and it's all wrapped up in a levy that goes underneath the city or the town, the municipality. So Clarksville did this a few years ago, 2019, and it has to be congruent, it has to be adjacent to. So they picked up a fire district, they created a fire territory, and the town of Clarksville then is the budgetary oversight and management of that fire territory. Jeffersonville is trying to do the same thing with the Utica Township Fire District. So it's Jeffersonville City and the Utica Fire District are trying to join and create a fire territory that would go under the management of the city of Jeffersonville. So the timeline on this is one of the things that's really interesting. Jeffersonville announced that they were exploring a fire territory in May of last year. In July, the county commissioners, through all the Jamey Noel stuff that had come out, that the fire district board was not being kept in the loop, was not up to date on things. And so the county commissioners in July replaced those board members and put a new board in and said, hey, go solve these problems, figure out what's going on with fire service for Utica. Well, in August, that fire board fired New Chapel and reached an interlocal agreement with the city of Jeffersonville to provide, I think it was like 18 months of service, all the way through. The interlocal goes all the way through the end of 2025. So December 31st, 2025. And what this means is that Jeffersonville, as a professional fire department, city-run fire department, and in close proximity to Utica, would basically take over fire protection, and they're receiving compensation from the board to do that. At first, I thought they weren't, but they are receiving compensation. So the fire territory conversation started before all that happened, and then they agreed to provide service, and the fire territory study continued. Okay. Simultaneously, around August, people from Jeffersonville, elected officials, office holders, reached out to discuss a service contract with some of the staff members at the River Ridge Development Authority. Because that's been a portion of this, is how do we provide fire service for River Ridge, which is a reuse authority, military reuse authority. So that's all as part of the timeline. The financial impact, or the actual presentation of the fire territory data, was made available to Jeffersonville in January. At that time, they scheduled the public hearings. They're required to have 3. They had one on February 6th, one on February 11th, and then one on, I'll get the third date wrong if I try to remember it, but there was another one. So they've had 3. Many of us in the county, other elected offices and tax entities, did not find out about the full impact until the second hearing, a few hours before the second hearing. I found out about it about noon on February 11th, on that date of the second hearing. And the question became for a lot of people, wait, how can Jeffersonville, who's taking this action, be making a decision that negatively impacts the budgets of other taxing units? And trying to help people understand that has been a monumental task.
So before we go into how exactly it's going to negatively affect, let's say when this kind of merger, if you will, happens between the Utica and Jeffersonville and to become a one fire territory, it's going to negatively affect the rest of the county.
Correct.
Perhaps we can back up to reconstruct the story that you just told and understand a little bit of it for people who are outside of Clark County, for those who are watching. So first of all, Jeffersonville has about 50,000 of the 250,000 people, excuse me, of the 125,000 people in Clark County, right? So it makes up, almost half of the people, just to give people, and that's more of an urban, somewhat suburban area versus the rest of Clark County, which is much more suburban, rural as well. And so, and then Utica is kind of a more suburban area that sounds like it's kind of split into 2 in some odd way, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of its municipality government or in terms of its fire government?
So they're actually, I guess, when you break it down like that, you kind of have to look at 4 components of Utica. Because you have the Utica Township, right? Because in Indiana, we have township governments. So you have the Utica Township with the trustee and all that stuff, right? Utica Township. But a large portion of the Utica Townships, that's one layer. The large portion of that has already been annexed by the city of Jeffersonville. So there are some.
And how does an annex happen? Do you know the system of that? Yeah.
It kind of depends on when they annexed it, because they're always changing annexation laws. I'm pulling up my other computer so I can tell you.
No, please.
So yeah, there's a section of Utica Township. There are 2 sections of Utica Township and Utica Town, or no, that's Utica Town. Never mind. I'm trying to find Jeff City. Okay, Charlestown Township. Okay, Utica Township, Jeff City taxing district. So one of the taxing districts is Utica Township, Jeff City. So Jeffersonville has annexed, and it just depends. I mean, it could have been a voluntary annexation. It could have been the city reaching out, at some point. I don't know what.
And if like Charlestown wanted to annex New Washington, right? Or wanted to annex, wanted to annex Marysville, and wanted to annex something and put it into its city. The reason for doing that would be more to expand the borders of the city in order to get more tax revenue from people's income and property taxes.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because with the tax caps and protections that our Constitution has, there's not just a terrible lot of value in annexing some only residential areas, because of the, there's always a trade-off. You always have to be able to provide a justification if you're going to do an annexation of, okay, these areas would be able to receive city services. A lot of times annexations are voluntary in the sense that you have people that want to tie into those city services. They want to be in the municipal police district, or they want to receive sewer service instead of septic, and the city may require annexation to make that happen, for instance. Road paving, road snow removal, those kinds of services that a municipality might do differently. So it just depends on, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know the history of how or when they annexed.
Not your city. Yeah.
Yeah. But I believe it happened. Actually, I think it happened in 2000. I do want to say I remember something about this, where in 2000, Jeffersonville annexed that portion of the township, I believe. But it's really only important to know that when you're talking about Utica, you have the township, you have a portion of the township, a large portion of the township that is considered city of Jeffersonville. They're already receiving Jeffersonville services, so they're already receiving fire protection from Jeffersonville. Okay. And then you have the fire district board, which is its own entity, right? Because it's appointed by the council. They are the ones, they act as their own taxing entity. And then you have the town of Utica, and the town of Utica is a very small, that is the municipal government. And it's kind of a nugget within the township. And they have a defined territory that they cover within the township that is governed by an elected town council. So.
Okay. So question for you. We're all filing our taxes right now, or at least we should be filing our taxes pretty soon individually. We have income tax and right, and then we pay that to the federal government. We pay some of it to that state government. Does any of that part that we pay to the state government go to local governments, the county or cities? Or if I live in Charlestown and I pay state taxes, do you get some of that in your budget?
Absolutely. So there are, when it comes to income tax, there are essentially three, and it depends on what counties did, but in the way that Clark County has it structured, there are three kind of funds that come in. So there's certified net shares, is what it's called. So like the whole pool of income taxes that come into Clark County are divided by certified net shares, and it depends on, you know, the size of your community, your levy, all those things, your tax rate, all those things. And
what's a levy? What's a levy?
The levy is the it's the draw from the fund, right? It's the money, it's the revenue that comes in. So when I say property tax levy, that's the formula, the magic number that I get that says this is how much Charlestown's getting in property tax revenue this year from that levy. We levy that tax against someone to continue that. So income tax. So the certified net shares goes to all of the taxing units. So I think there are 32 taxing units in Clark County. So the certified net shares is divided as a percentage, right? Based off of the levy. Okay. So if a city has a really big levy, then they're going to get a much larger portion of that piece of the pie. And we were talking about
levy is just a magical formula that takes into a whole bunch of things, population, other things, and says levy, this is what you get.
I mean, it's really hard to explain it. It's basically a formula that's established by the levy. The tax levy is a formula established by the state. And when we're talking property taxes, we're talking about they call it the MLGQ, which is the maximum growth maximum growth levy appeal, or maximum growth levy. It's really confusing, but it's a formula based off of math. That's what they're trying to change. But anyway, so you have the certified net shares, which goes to everybody, and that kind of goes into the general fund. And then you also have a portion of income taxes that only go to the municipal governments. So the fire departments don't get these, the libraries don't get these, the school don't get this. It's just like Clarksville town and Charlestown, city of Charlestown, city of Jeffersonville, Sellersburg, trying to get the others, Borden, right? So, and Utica town. So these portions, they get two other units. They get a economic development income tax, they call it EDIT, and they get a public safety or a local income tax, or LOIT, and it's used for public safety. So there are kind of three pots when you're looking at income tax, and then of course you have your property tax, which is separate as well.
And I live in New Washington, which is an unincorporated town, so I don't get those other two things. Because some of it's going, how does that happen?
The county does. So the county, as an elected government or as an elected group, does receive. So the people who get public safety income tax, local income tax, would be Clark County government. So yes, your government, your leadership is affected. Jeffersonville Civil City, Charlestown Civil City, Clarksville Civil Town, Borden Civil Town, Sellersburg Civil Town, and Utica Civil Town. But then all 32 of the units, including all the fire departments, all the township trustees, all the libraries, the school systems, everybody, they get the certified net shares portion.
Okay. So our state taxes, when we say state taxes, they're actually not just state. They're going to our local government. I'm in an unincorporated town, so it's really going to my county government, because they're the ones who are policing and firing my area, and EMS, etc., doing the roads. And then you are leading a city, and so you are getting your own bit for that to do the work of the city.
Right.
And then just for people that don't know, because I know there's people watching that don't know much about Jamey Noel, just to quickly sum up Jamey Noel. So Jamey Noel was the sheriff of Clark County. He was the chair of the Republican Party of Clark County, and he was District 9 chair of the Republican Party, I believe. And he took control. He had his friends kind of control Utica Fire Department. Isn't that right? Is this correct?
So he was also the head of New Chapel EMS, and so
Okay.
New Chapel, as a for-profit ambulance providing company, founded Utica Volunteer Fire Department as their 501c3. So he was the head of that 501c3.
And then he used all of his power to take money from our government. And so he took, we think, around $5 million. I don't know whether that number has changed or not.
And he pled guilty to, over 20. How many was it? It was like some ridiculous number of felony counts of theft,
Right.
invasion, and yeah.
And then he made a lot of money with cars and with the fire departments. And then people didn't get great ambulance care because of this scheme to get money to make himself richer and his friends richer. It hurt the ambulance services. So people would be calling 911 and they would ask, which service is coming to pick me up? And if they named the one that he was in charge of, they would hang up and drive their loved one themselves to the hospital. So people died because of this. And people are still hurting. And the main hurt that Jamey Noel did is Clark County, but it also really hurt the whole state because it took all the state money that we're supposed to be getting to provide care. So now we're cleaning this up, and you're the mayor of Charlestown, so you're part of this cleanup. And then there's confusion going on with redistricting of the fire houses.
So I think that it's really, really important to pause for just a moment and acknowledge that I am against the fire territory because of some of the way that it's been done and because of the negative impact on my city's budget. However, Utica really suffered under Jamey Noel and as an outcome of his actions. And I am not in any way minimalizing the impact on the town of Utica and that portion of the township that was not covered. So the whole county negatively was affected by the ambulance service, but Utica had a double hit in that they also had horrible fire service because he was supposed to be in charge of it and wasn't. So, nobody who has been opposed to this has said at any time that Utica doesn't need answers.
Right.
It's really more about how the process has happened to go about trying to get those answers that people are concerned with.
And then you are responsible for your town. You're going to do everything you can to protect your town. So we just need to clear up what's going on. Okay. I understand better. Thank you.
And so New Chapel went by the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
Utica said, okay, now we don't have EMS, we don't have fire services. What's going to happen? Jeffersonville said, we'll take care of it for you. They got paid to do it, of course, because it costs money. But they said, we'll take care of it for you with our municipal fire department. And they're currently doing that, and that expires soon. And so the question on the table is what happens now? Once that expires, who's going to take care of the people of Utica?
Right. And, I think it's important to note that in the press releases that Jeffersonville did in July, early August, about them stepping in to provide this coverage, their fire chief and the mayor, people said over and over that this providing the service for them in no way impeded their ability to provide quality service for their existing area. So they repeatedly said that they have the power and the ability and the budget and the equipment to provide this service to this missing piece of Utica, and it in no way was going to negatively affect the rest of their city. So they were well equipped to do this, where some units are not well equipped to do this. Other units, other fire districts might be too far away. They might not have that full reach of ability, but Jeffersonville said, hey, we can do this. We can do this easily. It doesn't impact us at all to do it. So we're going to do it because it was the right thing to do. And I want to make sure that we understand, I commend Jeffersonville for doing that. Stepping in and providing coverage for Utica in that was absolutely the best thing and the right thing for them to do. So that made sense.
And so they said, we'll do that because we can. We know, we've looked at the numbers. We've looked at our resources. We can do that. That was how long ago?
That was in August.
That was in August. So
where all the way through. Now, they had already started looking at a fire territory before that. They started investigating the idea of a fire territory in May. They didn't start taking over for Utica with the new fire district board until August. And then they reached an interlocal agreement that goes all the way through the end of December 31st of this year, 2025.
Okay. And so they started looking into it because everybody saw the writing on the wall of what was happening with New Chapel. It was going down fast. And people were scared of, losing. I mean, I live out here in New Washington. We were well, who's going to pick us up when we call 911?
Right.
And so they started doing that beforehand to try to say, how are we going to get Utica covered? Somewhere in May, somewhere in August, they said, okay, we're actually going to cover you. And they said, we have the resources. Now it's 8 months later or so. And at this point, does Jeffersonville, they said they could do it. Is the proof there that they could do it, that they did a good job covering Utica, or that it hurt other things? Is there any studies on that, or is it just?
I haven't seen any data regarding the call volume to Utica or issues with Utica. As far as from the fire department, I haven't.
No one's brought that up.
Not in a public way that I've seen. No.
Okay. All right. So here we are in this situation now. In December, it's going to run out. Something's going to happen. Jeffersonville is saying, okay, let's merge our fire department or fire districts to become a fire territory with Utica, and we'll cover this.
Right.
And so what does that do to taxes? How is this now related to taxes in some way? Why are my taxes going to be directed there? Or why is the New Washington Volunteer Fire Department going to get hurt in some way? Why is Charlestown schools going to get hurt in some way? Like, this is where we need your help to figure out how this is all related.
It can get confusing. So to create a fire territory, what they're doing is they're creating a new levy, right? So there are about 32 different levies. And again, the levy is how much revenue I'm getting from taxes. Okay. It's my budget. Think of the levy as my budget. Okay. For the city of Charlestown or all these other units. The fire, so instead of 31, now they're gonna be 32, right? Because they're adding a new levy. But the kicker is that it doesn't stand alone as its own levy. It gets wrapped up into the levy of the city of Jeffersonville. So Jeffersonville's levy, instead of being X amount, is going to be X plus this new amount. Okay.
It's going to be Jeffersonville plus Utica.
Well, not Utica, but the levy for the fire department. So the fire department the fire territory becomes its own levy. So instead of having Jeffersonville a levy and the Utica fire district having a levy, the Utica fire district goes away. You have this new territory, but that territory's levy is added where the fire district is its own and Jeffersonville's its own. Now you have the fire territory and it's going to be tied in with Jeffersonville. They become one. And so it makes Jeffersonville's levy much larger. And the size of the budget that has been created for the fire territory makes it even larger than just larger. It's extra large. Right now, the city of Jeffersonville has a fire department budget from their general fund, which comes from mostly property taxes, and then also the certified net shares from the income tax. It's $14 million to pay for the fire department services in the city of Jeffersonville and the portion of Utica that they already covered. And, they're using that to cover the uncovered area. The budget proposed for this fire territory is like 30 million. I mean, it jumps the first year to 28 and goes up to 30. It's a massive increase. They have wrapped all of their capital improvements for a couple, a new station they want to build, all this new equipment they want to get, outfitting the old firehouse down in Utica. They've wrapped all this into one big year instead of phasing this in over time.
And let me just ask, do they ask for that 30? Or they're just going to be given the 30 million because of how the merger works and the levying.
It's the budget they set.
If the budget gets approved, they get all that money.
Yes. So they said, this is what we need. This is the budget we need. And that budget we needed determined how much additional taxes would be paid by people to make that budget happen.
And if you're doubling the budget, the money's going to be pulled from other things that are needed. And I'm just going to say about public schools, our public schools are being defunded for the last 20 years, and they're giving the money to private and charter schools. And it's really, really hurting schools. I don't think they can lose any more money. They can't lose pennies. My kid's school's doing a fundraiser every week just to stay afloat,
Right. So
one question before you said it, who approves the 30 million? So
that's a good question.
Council of Jeffersonville says we want to put a $30 million budget out there. The mayor of Jeffersonville says, cool, let me sign on that. And then they're like, we get $30 million. Like, who then says that's okay?
They have to go through the process. So in order for this territory to pass, the city of Jeffersonville has to pass it 3 readings because it's an ordinance for them. They've already had the first 2 readings, and it passed 7-2. The final adoption date for them, the final reading, is set for March 13th. So they have to pass it, and the Utica Fire District Board has to pass it, and they also have it set to pass on the 13th. So both the units have to approve it. If both units approve it, there is no remonstrance process.
What's remonstrance mean?
There is no there's no way for us to say don't do this and go through a period of saying we don't want this, can you reconsider? Like, we don't have a voice in this. If it happens. Now, once they pass it, it goes to the Department of Government Local Finance, the DLGF, for approval. So ultimately the state agency has the final word. And as far as what they could do, I guess they could say, well, this is too big, we're going to reduce the levy, or maybe they can reject it, whatever they do. But ultimately the final word falls with them. But if they follow the
and you're talking about next week, the 13th, March 13th.
Yes. Okay.
And so DLGF is a state organization.
Yes.
It is is it a politically charged organization in one way or another?
I mean, it's a cabinet position. So I mean, it's under the governor's control, basically.
So you would think that if this is going to hurt the more rural parts of Clark County, and this goes to essentially a Republican cabinet member to approve, and it's going to help the more blue parts of Clark County, is that playing into the decision in some way by the state?
No, I don't think so. I will be 100% fair, and I will say that my experiences with the DLGF under the prior administration were always fair, and were always, if you followed the procedure, if you followed the rules, it was kind of like, okay, you did the things you needed to do, so you got your approval. I think the only time they wouldn't approve something is if there was a violation somewhere along the way or a legal challenge. Now, there could be a legal challenge that I'm not aware of that might shut this down as well. But I've been working to try to convince both units, especially the Jeffersonville City Council, to just slow down a minute and come back to the drawing board on this, because the impact is significant. So like I said, there are 2 ways it hits. So property taxes, as well as the income tax revenue. And I went through the presentation that was made at the public hearings, and I did the math kind of collectively, because you can look on the presentation, it'll show you the line item for each unit, but you have to kind of do the math yourself to figure out the impact. Now, they only did a 3-year projection. Okay, so they stopped 3 years out and said, here's the impact for the next 3 years. So we don't know what the impact, we don't have dollar amounts for after the 3 years, but it continues to be negative basically throughout. So just for perspective, taking into consideration both the property tax impact and the income tax losses, the losses from both of those over the 3-year period, the county, so Tim, the government that provides your services for mostly, is going to lose $4.5 million. All of the townships combined, I took all the townships. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 townships. I took those and I totaled their total, and it comes to $171,000, with the majority of that being Jeffersonville Township, who loses $122,000.
Wow.
The Charlestown, our city, we lose just shy of 500,000, so 494,000. Clarksville, which is another large kind of metropolitan just outside of Louisville and across from Jeffersonville, they lose 2.5 million. Borden, which is a very small town, they lose 14,000, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you know how small it is,
yeah, I live in Palmyra, our small town. Every dollar counts. Yeah.
Sellersburg loses 219,000. Utica civil town. So like this blows my mind. Utica town did not even know this was happening.
So it's not been very transparent this money.
No, nobody from, and this has been my argument to the Jeffersonville council members and to the mayor. It's like, you should have reached out to us directly and told us the impact. Don't leave it on us to come to your public hearing, because you don't come to my public hearings. I don't randomly go to public hearings and other.
It's not like you're busy. You're not busy, Treva.
Right.
You're busy.
And the notice that's published doesn't say anything about the taxpayers in other areas or Clark County. The legal notice that ran said, notice to the taxpayers of the city of Jeffersonville and Utica Township Fire District. It said nothing about Utica Town or Clarksville or Sellersburg or Charlestown or Borden or Newark, nothing. Okay. So none of us.
To be clear on that was them following the letter of the law of what they're supposed to do. Right?
Correct.
It's not, they weren't necessarily being subversive.
They're not doing anything wrong.
Anything.
They're just not being very transparent. They didn't let you know that your budget's going to be cut a bunch until it was almost too late. And now we're trying to get the word out about this taxpayer money that would help a lot of people.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there was no direct notification provided. And it just, if it's going to have that big of an impact, my whole thing was, I would never do this as a leader to other parts of the community, because when Clark County thrives, we all thrive. And I just said, hey, direct notification would have been great, because Utica Town didn't even know this was happening. The school corporations collectively, so this includes Borden, Henryville, Silver Creek, Clarksville Community Schools, and Greater Clark County Schools, are losing $4.8 million.
Oh man, really?
Yes. The libraries, so Jeffersonville Library loses $398,000, and the Charlestown Clark County Library loses $114,000, for a total of $513,000 from libraries. And then
depends on that $114,000. Most of his, group education, being a 2-year-old right now, comes from going to the library functions in Charlestown.
Absolutely.
Our new Washington Library is an annex of Charlestown. So that's actual real educational impact.
And then even the other fire departments lose. So collectively, the Charlestown Fire Department, the Tri-Township Fire District, and the Monroe Fire Protection District lose $511,000. So that affects your fire department as well.
Yeah, and so those are volunteer fire departments.
Those are like the fire districts, the other fire districts. Yes.
Okay.
So
and just to be clear, just to be clear on that, so I can understand, all of those are volunteer, and the only one that's not volunteer in Clark is Jeffersonville.
Jeffersonville does have a professional paid fire department, but some of them are actually going to hybrids. So Charlestown Volunteer Fire Department, for instance, has 2 full-time staff. So we actually have 24/7 coverage from a paid staff now. Even though it's considered a volunteer fire department, it's a hybrid. So they have paid staff that are there to provide 24/7 coverage. And then they also have volunteers that provide the majority of it. So
can we just repeat those education numbers for Sarah, who had to step off for 2 seconds, right at the moment of the main issue that Sarah is a champion of?
So all of the school corporations in the county, so this includes Borden Henryville School Corp, Silver Creek School Corp, Clarksville Community Schools, and Greater Clark Schools, collectively lose $4.8 million, with Greater Clark receiving the brunt of that at $4.1 million.
That is, extremely alarming. Yes. Extremely alarming. Wow.
With $4.1 million, what is the budget of New Washington High School? What is with $4.1 million going away?
I don't have the answer for that.
I'm not saying that you're gonna know that, but I'm saying it out loud to the world. 4.1 million's, their share of it is going to be in the hundreds of thousands. That's a lot. That's just a lot of money. That's a lot of money to go away. I don't know. I actually don't know if they'll be able to survive that or not, or what will happen to the quality of education, etc.
We should not give them that choice. So if your kids attend this school, if you are listening to this and you live in this county and you're alarmed about this loss of taxpayer money and what it's going to do to the whole county, what should we do, Treva? What advice do you have?
I think the best thing to do is to contact the people who are voting on this now. I will say that there are members of the Jeffersonville City Council who have been so phenomenal about receiving information and being willing to listen. Their email addresses, all of the council members' email addresses are available on the City of Jeff website. I've communicated with them through email. A couple of them, four of them at least, have been, responsive to me making phone calls. I've got another one, I think, that's trying to contact me tomorrow. So I think they're open to hearing people's feedback, but I feel like people need to make sure that when they're giving that feedback, a couple of things, and I've stressed this from the very beginning, that they be factual and that they be respectful, because this is a huge decision and it's a very difficult decision for this council to make. Utica needs protection. There's no doubt about that. And Jeffersonville stepped up and did the right thing by offering that protection for this period of time. And they are to be commended for that. I just think that the message should be, hey, a fire territory might be the right thing, but maybe the budget doesn't need to be so big right away to have such a huge impact. And maybe it's not the right time. Maybe this year isn't the right time. Maybe we could slow down and have conversations.
Yeah, it definitely needs to stop being so rushed. This is a huge decision that's going to impact everybody. Most people have no idea it's going on. So yes, table this, slow it down. Yeah.
Right. So that's the big thing, because I think the other thing to take away from this, so I just rattled off a whole bunch of totals for people that are losing money. You notice I didn't say anything about Jeffersonville. One of the things that's made people so uncomfortable with this is that Jeffersonville actually gains money from this. So that $14 million, for instance, that they pay right now out of their general fund, their property tax fund that goes towards fire, they don't have to pay that anymore, because the fire services will all be covered under the new revenue that's coming from the taxpayers. Okay. So they do take a $9 million loss because you can't have duplicate tax services. This is where it gets really in the weeds, and I apologize for that. But just know that you can't tax someone twice for the same thing. And because you can't tax someone twice for the same thing, they do take a $9 million loss, but they get that other $4 million, roughly $4 million, back into their budget. And they can reappropriate that wherever they want. So they get a gain of $4 million to their general fund that they no longer have to spend on fire.
This is just another reason why we should not be rushing this decision next week.
They also get an additional $2 million over the next 3 years from the income tax. So they stand over the next 3 years, they will actually be receiving $6 million more than they have right now, while the rest of us are receiving less.
Okay. I understand this pretty well, and I did not get it at all when you first started talking. So thank you. Good job. I just am wondering, what are people getting wrong online? There's a lot of talk about Clark County because of Jamey Noel. It got national attention.
Yes.
And also people are very heated online. It's a whole thing that we need to learn how to speak to each other better, like we're face to face. But since we don't have that, I guess people feel freer to be cruel or let their emotions go wild. Is there anything you would like to clear up? Like a lot of people are getting something confused, or can we help with this? Because I know there's misinformation, there's disinformation. What can we do to help?
So I will always tell people when something is my opinion or something is fact. And it's been my opinion that this is going too quickly and that it needs to slow down and that conversations need to happen with other taxing units. That's Treva's opinion. But there are some facts that need to be clarified. And I'm just going off of some of the stuff that I've seen said online. One of the things that's been said in public meetings and online is that the River Ridge Commerce Center bears a brunt and a majority of the problem here. The River Ridge Commerce Center is a military reuse authority. In Clark County, we used to have the Indiana Army ammunition plant, and it was a ammunition plant built in World War II to help win the war. And when the Army left that land in 1998, 1999, they just walked away. They just closed everything up and walked away. And it was this huge scar on the communities, both in Charlestown and in the portion of Jeffersonville that is part of the plant. And it's about, it's split between the two. And it is a reuse authority, which means it is governed by a board, a 5-person board. and it's appointed by the authorities that have interest in this. So one appointment is from the Port Authority through the state, one is from Utica, one is from Jeffersonville, one is from Clark County, and one is from the city of Charlestown. There are 5 of us. I serve on this board on behalf of Charlestown. The board is in a separate TIF district, tax increment financing. Tax increment financing districts work to promote redevelopment of blighted land, like this old ammunition plant that was just a mix of concrete and steel left over from its days in operation. The idea behind them is that whatever property tax revenue was coming through at the time it was established, it's frozen at that level. And it goes back into the fund, not out to the general distribution. And that money then in the special fund is then reinvested in the property to clear up the blight, to provide the infrastructure. The tax increment financing district that governs River Ridge is a different statute than a city's tax increment financing district, because cities, towns, county, we all also have the ability to have tax increment financing, but it's a separate state law. Okay. It's important to keep in mind that when Charlestown and Jeffersonville cities annexed the portion of the ammunition, the former ammunition plant that is now in our city limits, Charlestown did it in 1960 and Jeffersonville did it in 2000. It was already a zero tax revenue area. Okay. It was already owned by the federal government. So in 1960 or 58, 60, when Charlestown annexed that portion, they weren't receiving any property tax revenue from that land because it was already federal government property. When Jeffersonville annexed it in 2000, the River Ridge Reuse Authority had already been established, and that, again, no property tax revenue from that. So both of our communities would have known that. The people who were in charge of our communities at that time would have known that when they annexed that land, that you're going to be providing services. And it was a statute passed the year before Jeffersonville annexed it that they have to provide public safety to this area. So they would have known when they annexed this that they were going to have to provide police and fire protection to this district that they would not be receiving property tax revenue from. Okay. So there's this narrative going around that River Ridge isn't paying its part, that River Ridge is not contributing to what they're supposed to be. Well, by the letter of the law, River Ridge doesn't have to. Now that sounds really harsh and cruel, but it's true. By the letter of the law, they don't have to. However, River Ridge recently negotiated a police service contract with Jeffersonville and is in conversations. The Charlestown police chief presented at the last meeting as well for the board, because the board understands that if we want the Commerce Center to thrive, which we do, we need to provide for emergency services. And so they've successfully negotiated a police service contract with Jeffersonville. And the board's attorney spoke at one of the public hearings and pointed out that although the Commerce Center doesn't pay taxes in that sense, they're still willing to hear proposals and negotiate a fire protection service contract. So they've tried to have those conversations. So some of the things that have been said is that, there's a person that has said things about me in particular and said, well, you've been on this board since, 2020. Why are you complaining about this when you could have provided money and done something? Well, people have to ask. They have to come to the board. And it is a fact that the Jeffersonville city did ask the previous board before I was on that board for assistance, and they were donated land for a fire department. They've been given land within the Commerce Center to build a fire department. But at that time, there was no successful service contract negotiated. It's also a fact that I've been on the board since about April of 2020. I've been president of the board since January of 24. And just this past fall, we entered successful negotiations and last month approved a service contract for police. That is a fact. So we have made progress in that capacity. So it's unfair to not acknowledge that progress. It's also been said that River Ridge refuses to do this. And I think that the attorney...
When you say, can I just stop you for, when you say service contract, what does that mean exactly? That River Ridge is paying someone for police coverage?
So Jeffersonville Council adopted it. River Ridge Board has adopted it. The River Ridge is paying $500,000, roughly $500,000 a year now, to the Jeffersonville Police Department to provide patrolling services, police protection services within the Commerce Center on the section that is theirs. The Charlestown Police Chief appeared before the board at last month's meeting and requested a service contract to do the Charlestown end. So because they don't receive. So this is where Jeffersonville has an ally in me on the board, because I get it. I'm a mayor. I understand. We're not getting property tax revenue from the River Ridge Commerce Center. All those thousands of acres and buildings, we get no property tax revenue from those. We'll talk about income tax in a minute, but we get no property tax. And in Charlestown, 42% of my budget that is of my general fund, which is property tax driven, goes towards police protection. In Jeffersonville, 62% or 60% of their budget from their general fund, which is what they get from property tax revenue, goes towards police and fire. So police and fire services are paid predominantly with property tax revenue. And when you have a large area that's not paying property tax, you can be like, that hurts, right? But both of our communities knew that when they annexed that land. And so that's a fact.
But did they enter a bad deal, or do you think they entered into a good deal? So if they entered in a bad deal, then, when in business, when you're in a bad deal, you're either going to walk away from it or renegotiate it, right? Or deal with it. But the
renegotiation, that's what the attorney showed up at the last meeting, the last hearing, or the second to last public hearing, was like, hey, let's talk about this, right? I mean, he said, publicly, he gave them a memo and he said publicly, the board is willing to talk to you. So those conversations could happen over the rest of this year. For instance, if we slow this down, and there could be a contribution towards this that would help offset some of those costs. Okay. So that's one thing. But to say that they entered a bad deal is completely opinion versus fact. It's my opinion that they did not enter a bad deal because of the income tax that River Ridge has generated for the units of government.
And so you tell us about the income tax, and just how many jobs are in River Ridge, how many are in Jeff, how many are in Charlestown component, and then how many of those people live in Kentucky? Because I hear that is one of the things that people often say, yeah, we're talking about income taxes, but most of these people live in Kentucky.
Yeah, that's the majority of our workers in River Ridge are Indiana residents. We do have a few, but when you look at the numbers of who's going across the river to work versus who's coming across this way to work, it's night and day. I think Clark County as a whole sends like 38,000 people over, I think, to work in Louisville, and it's like it's around 10,000 or so. I might have those numbers wrong. I don't have them in front of me, but it's a very small portion that come the other direction. Okay. And so the majority of people are there, and you're talking about, roughly 12,000 jobs. And there's been like 2,600 announced for the Charlestown end over the next 18 months coming up. So, there are billions of dollars being generated, like a huge impact from River Ridge on the county, and Jeffersonville is receiving benefit from that.
And those are jobs that people will have full-time, part-time jobs, contractors that work in these buildings, these factories, these server farms that are there. Right. There's an Amazon warehouse, Facebook server. There are various businesses. Maybe you can tell us about some of those businesses. But there's also jobs from constructing those buildings, right? Those are enormous buildings. If anyone's been down 62 looking at those, or on the back of River Ridge there, along the river, and there's construction jobs. And then those people need to eat somewhere and fill their gas tank somewhere, et cetera. And so there's a lot of that's the benefit of bringing jobs to an area.
Correct. And the communities did not have to invest any of their money into fixing this, right? So Charlestown and Jeffersonville have paved no roads in the Commerce Center. They don't snowplow those roads. They don't patch those roads. Those are all Commerce Center roads, but the public gets to drive on them because they're treated as public roads.
Okay.
Now our communities do provide wastewater services for both. So Charlestown provides wastewater service for the Charlestown and Jeffersonville.
Can I push back on that a little bit right there? Because right now there's so much construction going on, which is a good thing. Lots of jobs. We all know, you and I live in this area. We know those people who are doing that construction and own those companies who are doing it. It's great for economy. It's great for a lot of people, but also they're driving on our county roads to bring the rocks that they need there, and the garbage that they need to take away, and the waste that they need to take away. So that's another argument I hear around, okay, they let us as citizens drive on the River Ridge roads, but also the River Ridge construction needs to use our roads. So isn't that a wash? Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, it is a wash, but at least we don't have to take care of those roads. Like, I mean, I look at that inventory and I'm like, thank goodness I don't have to take care of those roads. I don't have to do that. The city didn't have to clean up the mess. All that hazardous material and waste that was left behind, the cities didn't have to clean that up.
Sure. Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of benefit from having the Commerce Center and the Reuse Authority there managing that property.
And let me just take a moment to say thank you for explaining all this, because I know some of it is tense and some of it is like me just repeating. There's lots of people saying a lot of things around here and trying to bring those voices in, and some of it I have no idea what to say to them. I don't know if it's true or not.
I'm just confused on the Commerce. So who is paying for the roads that you're happy you guys are not fixing up? Who is paying for it? What's the Commerce?
That 5-member board, the Reuse Authority board. All that money that from land sales, from the TIF district, it all goes back into the Commerce Center to manage those things, to develop the property, clear the property, lay the infrastructure. So wastewater, water lines, roads, all that stuff they're putting in. And they also have given back to the community. So 2 years ago, they gave each community, Jeffersonville received $12 million and Charlestown received $12 million to build wastewater plants to provide for. So they're decreasing the burden on the residents. I didn't have to raise rates on the residents in Charlestown to double our capacity of our plant because of River Ridge contribution to that.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah, land. They've given, if you've ever been to Jeffersonville for Chapel Lake Park, that land was donated to Jeffersonville by the Reuse Authority. Charlestown has received 100 acres as well. We just haven't been able to develop ours as quickly. So
it's so nice to hear of all these good things that government is doing, because especially in Clark County, we're just constantly hounded with the Jamey Noel scandal and all the hurt. And so as just somebody following along who's political, but in a neighboring county, it's so scary. You're like, who can you trust? Who can you trust? And it's like, well, there are a lot of people you can trust that are working very hard for the county. There's an issue right now, and hopefully we can table it and fix it. But it is reassuring, and I think we sort of need more of that. So, Treva, I would love for you to come on again in the future to let us know good things that are happening, because we just see the negative so much that it kind of shifts our opinion on these local government workers.
Well, and I think there's some huge opportunities and takeaways from this whole situation. One thing I keep seeing people say and comment is that somehow this is the only option. It's not the only option. We don't know if it's the only option. We haven't had time to review.
Right. We definitely need to slow it down. I mean, it seems very obvious. We need to slow this down. Next week, schools losing millions of dollars, towns being stripped of money that they didn't have any time to budget for or plan for. It clearly seems like a bad idea. So yeah.
Well, and I think that it's an opportunity. So Clark County you're talking about bipartisan. This is going to take bipartisan work here. And because there are people from both parties that are kind of core people in all of this, right? Because you've got Clarksville, the town of Clarksville, the council is split with a slight majority of Democrats. Jeffersonville is a 9-person council. There are 5 Democrats and 4 Republicans. They have a Republican mayor. Charlestown, I'm a Democrat mayor. I've got an all-Republican council. The county commissioners are all Republican. The county council, all but one, are Republican. So, I mean, you're talking about a mix of people here, okay, of political parties. So
this makes me so happy that you all are working together. It's
bipartisan. Because this is not a political issue. This is not,
it's a people community.
It's not a political party issue. It doesn't matter what someone has on their name on the ballot on this particular issue. It's a community issue. And my whole point is that when we make decisions as a community, when I make a decision about Charlestown, if that has some kind of impact on other communities, that's inevitable. However, if that impact, it causes such a huge negative impact, then I've got to back up a minute. So when Clarksville, for instance, established their fire territory in 2019, the impact on the city of Charlestown was $34,000. Okay. It's not great. I don't like it when anybody takes, money that I'm expecting to get. However, 34,000 is a lot more palatable than 500,000. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that I look at it as an opportunity. right? I'm not out here telling them don't do a fire territory. I don't know if they need to do a fire territory. Maybe they do. Maybe that is the best answer. I know it took them a long time. If they started, if you do them, I mean, you just think about the timeline. If they announced that they were doing the study in May and they didn't get their data until January, that's a long time that they had to wait for that. But this is a very complex thing. So you want the financial analysis to be really accurate. So maybe that's why it took a long time. I don't know. But even the people that do that financial review for them, the company Baker Tilly, on their best practices on their website, they recommend that from the time you get your financial numbers, that you take 6 months to a year to talk with and engage with the underlying communities. And that hasn't happened here. And so I'm just saying, let's just follow best practices. Let's get.
Did they say that in the public hearings? That fact that you just said that's on their website. Did they talk about that in public hearings? Of now that you have these numbers, now that you should wait or go through a process?
No, they did not.
No. Okay,
they did not. But it's also, I think that it's wrong for people to just get hung up on everything that happened in the past. There's a lot of blame going around, and I would tell people, stop with the blame. We're not going to get anywhere forward if we don't stop laying the blame. We get so hung up on, oh, it was Jamey Noel's fault, he did this. Or I've seen people going after the county commissioners and saying, well, you appoint the board, the district board, why didn't you do X, Y, or Z? Or I've seen people looking at me and saying, well, you're on River Ridge board, why didn't you blah, 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 right? Well, I'm one of 5 people. So, and people haven't been in the meetings to see, they don't know. I don't know what the county commissioners have said to each other. Yeah. I don't know, people don't know what River Ridge board members have said. I mean, there's the public meeting, but when you're negotiating things, I don't know. I wasn't there with all the staff when they were having their meetings. It's been said I refused to meet with the Jeff City council members. That's absolutely not true. I was letting staff do what staff do, because I try to keep a very healthy separation between my role as a board member there and my role as mayor. And everything I've said about this issue is related to my role as mayor, not as a board member. So I just think that we need to stop laying the blame. We need to be inviting. We need to not be critical or harsh against the people that are making this decision, because it's a huge decision. I understand the magnitude of the decision they're making. I think that at the end of the day, whatever decision they make, Clark County needs to continue to thrive. And if we start butting heads with each other as communities and fighting, that's going to get us nowhere.
It sounds like if this decision gets rushed and this happens, we're going to keep having the blame game. People are going to hurt in the community that have already been hurt so much from Jamey Noel. It just seems like a bad decision. I see a lot of the comments online. I see a lot of the hurt. People are so hurt that these people came in acting like they were going to help us, and they took money and harmed people, and they want revenge. And that's just honestly not how the world works. If we keep seeking revenge, we're going to be hurting the entire community that needs to be healing. And people also make mistakes. Some of the people in power believed Jamey Noel because he was very good at manipulating, and he seemed really nice to people that did things for him, and he gave them favors. And it's really hard to be like, wait a minute, is this person some expert manipulator that's taking $5 million of taxpayer money? Most people didn't see that coming until after. I'm okay with maybe a person knew a tiny amount of Jamey Noel's scandal, and now they're trying to correct it. I'm okay with that. I don't think other people have gotten there yet. We need to save this community that has been hurt. You are trying to do that. I'm so thankful you're mayor of Charlestown and you're on this board. And also, you're really good at communicating. You guys should follow her on social media, on Facebook. You put messages out. Follow Charlestown. You are explaining what is going on. I encourage other people that are in the government to also take time explaining, because this is confusing. You did not have to do this. This was not mandated that you got on our show and took time from your busy day, but it's needed. We are hurt. We are confused. We need to know what's going on.
Look, the only answer here for the lack of trust. So Clark County, and you can extrapolate that all the way up, right? The average person, why are voters so apathetic? Trust. They don't trust their government anymore. They don't trust They don't trust media. They don't trust their government. They don't trust the people who are making decisions in those houses. And the only answer for that is radical transparency. You can't just follow the bare minimum. You can't just say, well, I published a notice in the paper, we're having public hearings. You have to go out and you have to spend time truly engaging with people and putting it out there so they see it, because they don't trust the processes anymore. And in Charlestown, that's what we do. We do radical transparency. I put everything out there. I will always answer questions. And if it's something that I can't answer, I will say I can't answer that.
And you had a re-election and you won more this time than last time. And I'm really proud of you. And I think a big reason you did win is because of your communication. You are a trusting person. You will try to explain it over and over and over again. And I wish we had more of that.
I think you've got a comment that has popped up on Facebook that I think needs to be circled back.
So Nate Adams said, I'm still having issues understanding how people outside of a taxing district could vote to reduce the funds to it. That fundamentally seems like taxation without representation.
So let me explain that for you, Nate. Some of it is we have to rephrase or reframe the way you're thinking about this. This is not a taxing district voting to reduce the funds to another unit. That's not what's happening. It's a small distinction. It's a taxing unit that is voting to create, it's two taxing units that are voting to create a third taxing unit that gets lumped in with one of them and makes one of them go away to create a much larger taxing unit. And so we often say that like equality isn't pie, there's enough for everybody. Well, in this situation, the taxes are pie. So if I wish I had like a thing to draw with, I don't. So if I have a pie, it's my pie. And my levy, which again is my revenue, my budget, let's say it's $9 million and it takes up this much of the pie, right? This little piece of the pie. Then the larger piece of the pie for everybody else to distribute based on their percentages is bigger, right? If I have pie and I change my levy by creating another taxing unit and adding it to my levy, and my levy now goes from 9 million to 30 million, then that leaves a much smaller piece left for everybody else to divide. So that's what's happening here. I hope that helps, Nate. Please let us know if it does. But what's happening here is that you have a taxing unit, two units that are kind of creating a new unit that makes one of them much larger. And they're consuming the majority of the available pie, which then leaves less of that pie to be distributed to everybody else. So it's not like they're voting to take, they're not bad people, guys. They're not voting to take money away from the units. That's not what's happening. They're voting to create this new unit. And it just so happens that I personally, opinion here, think that their budget is too large and they need to come back to the table, because if they could take a little bit of a budget sliced a little bit bigger, then maybe the impact wouldn't be so large, and that would be okay.
And just shout out to Nate Adams. He's our new vice chair of Harrison County Dems. And he's a friend of mine, and he's a rules person, and he helps me so much because I am not a rules person. Yeah. Okay. I understand a lot better. Hopefully people that are watching this that live in Clark County, please share this. Or if you understood the information, just tell everybody that you can, because the meeting is next week. And then go to the government website. What did you say that website is? Clark County government webpage.
For the email, this is Jeffersonville, so cityofjeff.net, and you can click on the menu and go to council and see all their email addresses.
Okay.
Can I ask one more thing before we wrap up here, which is, you said, Treva, let's slow things down. It does feel like there's a little bit of a false decision here, where it's like it's either this way of doing it or nothing, right? There must be some other way of moving forward. Do you have suggestions on some other way, or is it more, hey, this happened so fast, I need a little time to figure out a different way? Or do you have pieces of a solution that could be different?
Yeah, I think there are multiple things to consider. One, I think that I've never gotten a solid answer from the fire district board if they put out a request for proposals. There are private companies that provide fire protection. Did they advertise for that? Did they actually seek? Because the timeline when I look at it shows they didn't. The timeline when I look at it shows that as soon as this new board was appointed in July, they were immediately saying this fire territory was going to save the day. And so I've never gotten a solid answer on whether or not they put out a request for service for fire protection for that area. If they have a budget, they said they have like a $250,000 budget. My other question would be, since Jeffersonville admitted that providing that fire protection for them was not a burden on them, then could they just continue in an interlocal agreement to pay them a portion of their budget that they have for that additional fire service? That's another thing, right? So I think there may be other answers to that. If a fire territory is necessary, then does the budget have to be as large? They've got some really big capital improvement plans as a part of that budget. Can those be phased in over time? Can they save up for that as a capital improvement plan rather than like hitting the whole budget, the whole thing, like right off the bat, right? So those are some things I would consider. And then there's the EMS side of this, and that's a much bigger issue. So part of the reason their budget is so large is that $7 million of it is set aside for EMS coverage. And we already have EMS coverage through the county, through Heartland. Now, that's where we've all been jaded in the past, where we had New Chapel, it failed. They pulled in Heartland. There's still some big questions about Heartland. I'm not saying it's perfect, but could we not have, this is where I think everybody needs to get in the room and have conversations about, could we do a county EMS, like a county provided EMS? Is there a way for us to do that? And I think that some people have proposed that, but we have not had time to explore that as an option. It's only been about a year, not even a year, since New Chapel was pulled away from all that. So I think everybody's just trying to rush to a conclusion extremely quickly. And these are kinds of big decisions that take a little bit longer to get there. I think the immediate needs of Utica are being met. They have fire protection through Jeffersonville right now. That's critical. We have an EMS provider and things are better than they were with New Chapel. We have room for improvement. So let's get the talking heads together and find a way to make that improvement.
The one thing you said in there is a piece of information that's still a little bit that I'd like to find out after this, I would say, to add into it, which is Jeffersonville said, hey, we can do this, what did you say, co-local agreement or interlocal agreement, and it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to get a little money from Utica to do it, and we'll take care of it. No one in Jeffersonville is going to get hurt by it. No, it's going to be good. And then it's now later than that, right? It's now 8 months later. Just this idea of, was that true or not, right? Just because they said it doesn't necessarily mean it was true or not. And that's the part that's a little shady for me, and that I'd love to try to figure out. That is not your responsibility to do in any way, right? That's Jeffersonville's responsibility to say, did this work or not? But yeah, that's a question I have outstanding that I'll try to figure out.
I bet other people are also trying to figure it out, because it's hard. It seems very hard to see. Yeah. So calling 911, are they getting adequate care? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I just am going to say, personally, my opinion, they should not take one penny from schools. Public schools are being attacked at the state level. They cannot afford to lose any more money. I'm friends with the superintendent at North Harrison, and he was explaining to me their budget, and any changes hurt so bad. If it's $5,000, it hurts so much. So millions, our kids deserve better. So I think we should table it, and they should table it and come up with solutions that don't involve taking money from the schools.
Right.
Yeah. I'm really thankful that you came on. I understand this a lot better, because I just see a lot of shouting and a lot of people upset and confused online. So now I feel like I get it better so that I can help people. But please share this episode if you are in Clark County. Big hug to everybody in the county. I'm sorry you have gone through so much with people that were supposed to protect you taking money. And I understand the hurt. But also, I at the same time, I want you to realize there are good people that aren't perfect, working really hard to try to clean this mess up. And I don't envy those people. And you're one of them, Treva. And I'm thankful you're there. It's a hard job. Just yelling at them because you're hurt is not going to help. But finding out what's going on and then contacting the people that have the power and explaining what you would like as a citizen of that county, I think can really help right now. So,
and I've put some guidance up and some other background information for this on my website, mayortreva.com. Under the news, I keep a blog every now and then that I post. And so there's some, if people need to go back and read a section, they can go read some of the details about this. And again, always reiterating that as you're communicating with the people who are making these decisions, to always be respectful, because it is a very heavy, very big decision, and to be factual. I think that when people start saying, things that are made up, that doesn't help anybody. And so the big takeaway for me is just to encourage them to not approve this next week. Hold off, table it, circle back around after we've had time to talk about this, after we've had time to understand the size of the budget, maybe review the budget, look at this, because if that levy could be reduced, if the impact could be reduced, that would help. It also could save taxpayers money, because Utica people are looking at a 30% tax increase with this. And if they don't have to pay that, if there's a way to do this without that large of an increase, then they absolutely should be considering that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also for anyone who wants to come on the show that has kind of an opposite opinion, counterfactual information to put on, that stands open. I'm not going to call out any individual right now and say, I want that person on here, but there's an open invite to us. Please, contact us through Facebook and say, yeah, I have some different information that I'd like to put on onto the show, and hear those opinions as well.
And just always remember, these elected officials like Treva, they're human beings. And when you put comments on Facebook slamming them like they're monsters, it hurts. I've put myself out running for office twice. And so I got it then. And it hurt my mental health. So we're not perfect. We are human beings doing the best we can. And when you find someone that is genuinely just trying to help the community, we should support them. So Treva, supporting you, what would that look like?
Just engaging in the process and learning more, asking questions. So if there's something that's not clear, ask questions. It doesn't have to be of me, it can be of others, but then getting the other side and asking people, is this your opinion or is this fact? Right. So I think just learning to be a critical consumer of the messages we receive is critical for that, as helping empower Jeffersonville, because I would imagine that they feel a need to provide coverage, EMS coverage for their own people, because they've reached a point of frustration. I've been there. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability with the size of my city to be able to provide EMS coverage on our own. I have to remain with the county system, which means I have to work within the resources that are there. So just encouraging them to let's work together in the resources that are there. But I think at the end of the day, the big takeaway is to remember that we are all neighbors. We all, we see each other at the grocery store. We run into each other at restaurants. We need to work together. And regardless, especially during an election year, and things can get so ugly and things can be said in an election year, regardless of the outcome of an election, you got to pick up and you got to keep moving, and you got to work with people from different parties. And it's really about getting the work done, about getting the decisions made. And so regardless of the outcome of the vote next week, we have to remember that. And we have to not just dig our heels in and protect our own community, but think broader than that. Because if one of our communities suffers, then the rest of us aren't good at all. And that's why I am been grateful to Jeffersonville for stepping up and helping Utica with their fire coverage, because the people who live in Utica are Clark County people. They're human beings. They matter. And we need to make sure that their emergency services are met. I just think that we can have those conversations about doing that long-term in a way that doesn't take from the public safety dollars and support to the other communities.
Thank you, Treva. Yeah, thank you for being such a clear communicator and being someone who has proven to work across the aisle, proven to work for people who need help, no matter what their political affiliation is. I know.
And we need more of that.
We do.
We need more bipartisan support from each other, and we need more communication. And so any political leader, any elected official that spends time doing that, I'm so thankful for. And you're definitely one of those people. So thank you for all that you do. I'm really thankful you're in Indiana and that I get to be friends with you. I'm lucky. And
well, thank you. You're welcome back on the show too. After all of this, if the vote goes through one way or another, to say anything else you want to add on, and you're always welcome on the show, no matter what you want to talk about. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Treva, and great. Good luck with all of this, and we want to know what happens we want to know what happens later. So keep us updated.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.